The calculated surrender. The Sargosa guards dragged General Ilara Voss through the sterile corridors of Helcarax Station, their scaled hands rough against her arms. Pain flared from her cracked ribs, but she kept her face impassive. 6 weeks as a prisoner of the Sargosi Empire, and finally, she had arrived at her destination. "Move faster, human," hissed the guard on her left, shoving her forward. His serpentine eyes narrowed in disgust. Voss stumbled but didn't fall. The magnetic restraints on her wrists glowed with a harsh blue light, cutting into her skin. Her once pristine military uniform was now a tattered mess, deliberately so. The appearance of defeat was crucial to her plan. Helcarax Station hung in orbit around a dwarf star at the edge of contested space, its massive structure bristling with weapon emplacements and defense systems. Known as the frozen hell among human forces, no prisoner had ever escaped its walls. The Sargosi used it not just for containment but for intelligence extraction and as a command hub for their military operations in the sector. Voss had committed every scrap of intelligence about this place to memory before allowing herself to be captured. 6 months earlier, human intelligence had intercepted fragments of data suggesting the Sargosi were developing a weapon capable of destabilizing stars, turning them into supernova. If completed, such a weapon could obliterate entire human solar systems with billions of lives. Conventional military assaults on Helcarax had failed repeatedly. The station's defenses were impenetrable. So Voss had proposed what her superiors called a suicide mission: allow herself to be captured, infiltrate the station, and destroy the weapon research from within. The guards brought her to a large chamber dominated by a circular platform. Surrounding it were screens showing various sectors of human space. Standing on the platform was Supreme Commander Dravix, leader of the Sargosi forces in this quadrant. Unlike most Sargosi with their slender bills, Dravix was massive, his scales a deep crimson with gold markings signifying his high rank. General Ilara Voss. Dravix's voice rumbled through the translator at his throat. Architect of the Proxima defense. Destroyer of our third fleet. He circled her slowly, examining her as one might study an insect. Not so impressive now. Voss raised her head, meeting his gaze. War has its fortunes, Commander. Today yours, tomorrow perhaps mine. Dravix made a sound that might have been laughter. There will be no tomorrow for you, General. Not one where you command armies again. He gestured to the screens. Your forces retreat across 3 sectors. Your colonies fall one by one. And their greatest military mind stands before me in chains. If you're expecting me to beg for mercy, he'll be disappointed, Voss said, her voice steady despite the pain lancing through her body. No, humans rarely beg. It's one of your few admirable qualities. Dravix moved closer. I have questions for you, General. About Earth's defense systems. About the deployment patterns of your remaining fleets. His forked tongue flickered between his teeth. You will answer them, eventually. I know nothing of current deployments, Voss replied truthfully. I've been your guest for 6 weeks. We shall see. Dravix nodded to the guards. Take her to Cell Block Omega. Maximum security protocols. As the guards led her away, Voss allowed herself a momentary smile. Cell Block Omega. Exactly where she needed to be. The station schematics had indicated it was closest to the research laboratories. Her cell was small, barely 3 meters square, with a hard platform for sleeping and basic sanitation facilities. The walls were smooth metal with no visible seams. A surveillance device washed from one corner, its red light blinking steadily. When the force field shimmered into place across the entrance, Voss sat on the edge of the sleeping platform and began to take inventory of her injuries. The cracked ribs would heal in time. The cuts and bruises were superficial. More concerning was the neural disruptor they had implanted at the base of her skull during processing, a device designed to cause excruciating pain if she attempted to escape or attack personnel. She ran her fingers over the small bump where it had been inserted. Phase 1 complete, she thought. Captured and delivered to Helcarax as planned. Her superiors would have received her final encoded transmission 3 weeks ago. confirming her status and initiating the wait protocol. They would give her 3 months to complete her mission before writing her off as lost. 3 months to infiltrate the most secure facility in Sargosi space, locate and destroy their superweapon research, and somehow signal Earth's fleet for extraction, or die trying. Days blended together in the windowless cell. Twice daily, nutrient paste was delivered through a small opening in the wall. Once every 3 days, she was allowed 15 minutes in a communal washing facility under heavy guard. The routine was designed to break prisoners, to disorient them until time lost meaning. Voss used it to her advantage. With each trip to the washing facility, she mapped more of the station, counting steps, noting guard rotations, identifying security cameras, and access points. She observed other prisoners, various species from worlds conquered by the Sargosi, looking for potential allies. On her 4th trip, she noticed a tall avian prisoner with mottled blue feathers. The guards handled him with unusual care, suggesting he possessed knowledge or skills the Sargosi valued. When they passed each other in the narrow corridor, Voss deliberately stumbled against him. "Watch yourself, human," he hissed, but as he steadied her, she felt him press something into her palm, a small metal shard, barely the size of her fingernail. Back in her cell, Voss examined the gift. It was sharp enough to serve as a primitive tool. She concealed it in a small tear she made in her sleeping mat, then waited for lights out. When the main illumination dimmed, she retrieved the shard and began carefully scratching marks on the underside of her sleeping platform, creating a map of everything she had observed. The surveillance device couldn't see beneath the platform, and she worked silently, methodically, adding to her mental blueprint of HFY Station. On her 12th day, the interrogations began. 2 Sargosi officers came for her, taking her to a small room equipped with various devices, whose purpose was all too clear. The lead interrogator, a female Sargosi with unusually pale scales, introduced herself as Lieutenant Serax. "Your reputation precedes you, General Voss," Serax said, her voice almost gentle through the translator. "Your resilience is legendary even among our kind, but everyone has breaking points." What followed were hours of pain interspersed with questions about Earth's defenses, troop movements, command structures, information that, even if Voss had possessed it, she would never have revealed. But the interrogations served a purpose beyond resistance. They gave her glimpses into Sargosi command operations, snippets of conversations between guards, access to parts of the station normally off-limits to prisoners. During one session, while pretending to be semi-conscious, she overheard 2 officers discussing Project Supernova and its development timeline. The weapon was real, and it was nearing completion. After 3 weeks, Voss had made contact with 7 other prisoners, forming a loose network of allies. The avian, who called himself Tarek, had been a navigation officer before his capture. But bulky, stone-skinned Cordon named Grull had worked maintenance on Sargosi vessels. A pair of telepathic Lazari twins had been political prisoners for decades, but had developed methods to communicate without detection. Together, they shared information, created distractions when needed, and passed messages throughout the cell blocks. Voss was careful never to reveal her true purpose, presenting herself merely as another prisoner seeking to improve their conditions. But she positioned herself as a leader, someone with experience and authority, and the others naturally gravitated toward her. On the 30th day, during a routine meal distribution, Voss noticed a young Sargosi scientist observing her through the force field. Unlike the guards with their military bearing, this one moved with an academic's awkwardness, his scales a lighter shade indicating youth. "You're her," he said without preamble. "The human general who destroyed our 3rd Fleet at Proxima." Voss looked up slowly. "I commanded forces there, yes. How did you predict our attack vector? Our cloaking technology should have been undetectable to your sensors." Voss considered him for a moment. This was an opportunity. Military strategy isn't just about technology. It's about understanding how your opponent thinks. The young scientist seemed genuinely intrigued. "I'm Dr. Krelva. I've been studying human cognitive patterns as part of my research. And what have you learned about us? Voss asked, rising to approach the force field, careful to stay just shy of its energized boundary. You're unpredictable, illogical at times. You make decisions based on emotional factors that our models can't account for. Krelva's eyes narrowed. It makes you dangerous. Or perhaps your models are flawed, Voss suggested. Perhaps there's a logic to human decisions that you haven't recognized yet. This sparked a debate that lasted nearly an hour before a guard ordered Krelva to move along. But the scientist returned the next day, and the day after that, drawn by Voss's insights into human psychology and military strategy. She fed him carefully curated information, nothing that would compromise Earth's defenses, but enough to keep him coming back. Through these conversations, Voss learned that Krelva was part of the research team working on Project Supernova. He was responsible for calculating targeting algorithms that would maximize the destructive potential of artificially induced stellar collapse. His work was brilliant but theoretical. He had never seen the consequences of such weapons firsthand. Do you understand what happens when a star goes supernova? Voss asked him during one visit. Not just the physics of it, but what it means for the worlds in that system. Krelva tilted his head. Complete destruction. The energy release would sterilize every planet within several light years. And the people on those planets. Billions of lives, not just human, but all species, including those allied with the Sargosu. Collateral damage is inevitable in war, he replied, but she detected uncertainty in his voice. Is it war when one side has no chance to fight back? When entire populations are obliterated without warning? Voss leaned closer to the force field. That's not war, Doctor. That's genocide. She could see the conflict in his eyes. Like many scientists, he had focused on the technical challenges of his work without fully considering its implications. Voss recognized his potential value, not just as a source of information, but possibly as an ally. 45 days into her imprisonment, during another interrogation session, Voss made her move. Lieutenant Syrax had stepped out momentarily, leaving her with a single guard. Using techniques she had practiced in her cell, Voss dislocated her thumb, slipped one hand free of the restraints, and struck the guard at a precise point on his neck. He collapsed without a sound. Quickly, she accessed the guard's communication device and sent a prearranged signal to her network of prisoners. Throughout Helcarax, small disturbances erupted simultaneously. Nothing that would trigger a full lockdown, but enough to distract security personnel. Voss made her way to a maintenance terminal and inserted the access chip she had painstakingly constructed from materials smuggled by Grull. The terminal responded, giving her 30 seconds of access to the station's systems. It was enough to download a partial schematic of the research section and confirm the existence of Project Supernova. She was nearly back to her cell when alarms blared. A security sweep had detected the unauthorized system access. Voss knew she wouldn't make it back in time. Instead, she ducked into a utility closet, using the moment to memorize the schematic before destroying the evidence. When they found her, she offered no resistance. The punishment was severe: 3 days in isolation with the neural disruptor set to maximum sensitivity. Every movement sent waves of agony through her nervous system. But when they returned her to her cell, broken and barely conscious, Voss allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. She now knew where the weapon research was housed, how it was protected, and, most importantly, its critical weakness. Project Supernova required enormous energy channeled through a series of quantum stabilizers. Disrupt those stabilizers, and the entire project would collapse, potentially taking a significant portion of Helcarax with it. As she drifted in and out of consciousness on her cell floor, Voss's mind was already formulating the next phase of her plan. The young scientist Krelva would be key. His access, combined with the distraction her prisoner network could create, might give her the opening she needed. Supreme Commander Dravix visited her cell after the isolation period ended. He studied her through the force field, his expression unreadable. "Impressive, General," he said finally. "Your attempted infiltration was more sophisticated than I expected from someone in your condition." Voss said nothing, watching him through swollen eyes. "It changes nothing," Dravix continued. "Your efforts are futile. In 3 days, Project Supernova enters its final testing phase. Within a week, we will have the capability to destroy your home system." He leaned closer to the force field. "I wanted you to know that before the end. I wanted you to understand the complete failure of your mission here." After he left, Voss closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of doubt. 3 days was not much time. Her body was weakened, her resources limited. The odds of success were minimal. But then, they had always been minimal. That was the nature of her mission from the start. She thought of Earth, of the billions of lives depending on her success. She thought of her oath as an officer, her duty to protect. With effort, General Ilara Voss pushed herself to a sitting position. She had work to do. The reckoning. The morning of the 3rd day dawned like any other in the windowless confines of HFY Station. Lights flickering on at precisely 600 hours, temperature controls adjusting to the daytime setting, nutrient paste appearing in the wall dispenser. But for General Ilara Voss, everything had changed. Today was the day Project Supernova would enter final testing. Today was the day she would either succeed in her mission or die trying. Her body still ached from the punishment she had endured, but her mind was clear and focused. During the night, she had passed final instructions to her network of allies through the tapping code they had developed. Each had their role to play in what was to come. When Dr. Krelva appeared outside her cell for their now regular morning discussion, Voss was ready. The young scientist looked troubled, his scales lacking their usual luster. "You seem distressed, Doctor," Voss observed as he deactivated the audio monitoring for what he believed was a private scientific discussion. Krelva glanced nervously down the corridor. "The final testing begins today. Supreme Commander Dravix has ordered a demonstration." A demonstration. Voss kept her voice neutral despite the alarm rising within her. A small star system at the edge of contested space. Uninhabited, but, he hesitated, the resulting nova will be visible from 3 nearby colony worlds. The commander wants them to witness what awaits them if they continue supporting Earth's resistance. Psychological warfare, using terror as a weapon. Typical of Dravix's strategy. "And your targeting algorithms. Are they ready?" "That's why I'm here." Krelva lowered his voice further. "There's an instability in the quantum matrix. The calculations suggest a 12% chance of cascade failure during the test." "What would that mean?" Voss asked, already suspecting the answer. "The energy would backflow through the initiator. At best, it would destroy the research section. At worst," he trailed off, "at worst, it could trigger a chain reaction throughout the station's power grid." Voss finished for him. She studied his face carefully. "You've reported this risk. Commander Dravix says it's acceptable. The demonstration must proceed as scheduled." Voss took a calculated risk. "And you? Do you find it acceptable?" Krelva's eyes met hers, and she saw the conflict there. "I'm a scientist. My work is theoretical. The applications are your responsibility," Voss said firmly. "Every scientist throughout history has faced this moment, Doctor, when theory becomes reality. When your work leaves the laboratory and enters the world. What it does there reflects on you, whether you wish it or not." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Krelva spoke, his voice barely audible. "What would you have me do?" It was the opening she had been waiting for. "Help me stop it." The plan came together quickly. Krelva would arrange for Voss to be transferred to the research section for a special interrogation, ostensibly to extract information about human defensive capabilities before the demonstration. He would temporarily deactivate her neural disruptor under the guise of preventing interference with sensitive equipment. Meanwhile, her prisoner network would create coordinated disturbances throughout the station at precisely 1400 hours, stretching security resources thin. Tarek and the Lazari twins would jam communications in several sectors, while Grull would use his knowledge of Sargos's systems to trigger false alarms in non-critical areas. At 13:30 hours, 2 guards arrived at Voss's cell. "On your feet, human," Special Interrogation ordered. She complied without resistance, allowing them to secure her restraints before marching her through the corridors. As they approached the research section, Voss mentally reviewed the schematics she had memorized. The quantum stabilizers would be in the central chamber, surrounding the initiator core. Disable those, and Project Supernova would collapse. Dr. Krelva met them at the security checkpoint, datapad in hand. "I'll take responsibility for the prisoner from here," he told the guards, showing them an authorization code. One guard hesitated. "Protocol requires we stay with the prisoner at all times." "These are classified research areas," Krelva countered smoothly. "Your clearance is insufficient. Supreme Commander Dravix has approved this exception." He displayed the commander's authorization, which Voss suspected was either forged or obtained under false pretenses. Reluctantly, the guards handed Voss over and departed. As soon as they were out of sight, Krelva led her to a small medical alcove where he deactivated her neural disruptor. "It's temporary," he explained, hands shaking slightly. "The device will reactivate automatically after 4 hours unless reset with the proper codes." "It's enough," Voss assured him, rubbing her wrists as he removed the restraints. "Show me to the main research chamber." The laboratory was vast, dominated by a spherical chamber in its center. Through transparent sections, Voss could see the initiator core, a writhing mass of energy contained within multiple force fields, pulsing with power that made the air itself feel charge. Scientists moved purposefully around monitoring stations, making final adjustments for the demonstration. None paid attention to Krelva and his human companion, assuming she was authorized to be there. Krelva led her to a workstation and pulled up schematics of the system. "The quantum stabilizers are these components here." He pointed to a ring of devices surrounding the core. "They channel and focus the energy that will trigger stellar collapse. Disrupt them, and the initiator can't function. But disrupting them risks a cascade failure," Voss noted, studying the design. "Yes, the energy has to go somewhere." Voss checked the time. 13:50 hours. 10 minutes until the distractions would begin. "Can you get me access to the stabilizer control systems?" Krelva hesitated only briefly before nodding. His hands flew over the controls, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. "There, you have limited access. Enough to modify the calibration settings." "How long before the demonstration?" "Final preparations begin at 1500 hours. Energy charging starts at 1530. Initiation at 1600. Voss took his place at the console and began working, her military training in advanced systems coming into play. She wasn't a physicist, but she understood enough about energy systems to recognize critical points of failure. Carefully, she introduced subtle alterations to the stabilizer calibrations. Nothing that would trigger immediate alarms, but enough to ensure catastrophic failure when the system reached full power. At precisely 1400 hours, alarms began blaring throughout distant sections of the station. Security personnel rushed to respond to multiple incidents, just as planned. Monitoring screens in the laboratory showed chaos erupting in several cell blocks. "Prisoner uprising," one of the scientists announced, looking up from a communication terminal. "Security requests all non-essential personnel return to quarters." The laboratory began to empty as researchers followed protocol. Krelva remained, as did a senior scientist who eyed them suspiciously. "You should evacuate, Dr. Krelva," the senior scientist said, "and take your subject with you." "Critical adjustments remain for the targeting system," Krelva replied. Commander Dravix's orders were explicit. The demonstration proceeds regardless of other disturbances. The senior scientist hesitated, then nodded curtly before departing. They were alone in the laboratory. Voss worked quickly now, no longer concerned about subtlety. She accessed the main control protocols and began a systematic sabotage of the project's safety systems. How much damage will this cause when it fails? The research section will be destroyed, Krelva said. But the station has containment protocols. The rest of Helcarax should survive. That wasn't enough. The project data would survive. The Sargosi could rebuild. Voss needed total destruction. She thought quickly, remembering the station schematics. The central power core. It's directly beneath us, isn't it? Krelva's eyes widened. Yes, but if the feedback were directed downward, through the laboratory floor, it would breach the reactor containment. He finished, horror dawning on his face. The entire station would be destroyed. Along with everyone on it, Voss acknowledged grimly. Including us. A moment of silence passed between them. Krelva was a scientist, not a soldier. He hadn't signed up for a suicide mission. There must be another way, he said finally. If there is, I don't see it, Voss replied honestly. This weapon cannot be allowed to exist, Doctor. You know what it would mean. Before Krelva could respond, the laboratory doors slid open. Supreme Commander Dravix entered, flanked by 4 heavily armed guards. I thought you might attempt something foolish, General, Dravix said, his voice cold. Though I admit, I didn't anticipate you'd turn one of my own scientists against me. He fixed Krelva with a withering glare. Disappointing. Voss stepped away from the console, positioning herself between Dravix and the young scientist. He showed moral courage, something you wouldn't understand. Morality is the luxury of the victorious, Dravix replied, and victory will soon be ours. He gestured to the guards. Secure them both. The demonstration will proceed as scheduled. As the guards moved forward, a deafening explosion rocked the station. Emergency lights flashed, and the artificial gravity fluctuated momentarily. Dravix's communication device crackled to life. Commander, human vessels have appeared in Sector 7. They've breached our outer defenses. Voss couldn't hide her surprise. The Earth fleet wasn't supposed to arrive for another month, unless they had decoded more of her transmissions than she realized. Taking advantage of the momentary distraction, Voss lunged for the nearest guard, wrestling his weapon free. Years of combat training took over as she fired with precision, dropping 2 guards before the others could react. Krelva dove for cover as plasma bolts scorched the air around them. Dravix bellowed orders into his communicator, calling for reinforcements. Using the console as cover, Voss returned fire, forcing the remaining guards back toward the entrance. Another explosion, closer this time, sent tremors through the floor. The station's defenses were failing. You planned this all along, Dravix shouted over the chaos. Your capture, your imprisonment, it was all a ruse to infiltrate Helcarax. And you fell for it, Voss replied, firing again. Your arrogance made it easy. With a roar of fury, Dravix charged toward her position. Voss rolled aside, but he was faster than she expected. His massive hand closed around her throat, lifting her off the ground. You will not deny me my victory, human, he snarled, his face inches from hers. Your fleet will witness the demonstration firsthand before I destroy them. Struggling for breath, Voss saw Krelva rise from his hiding place, determination in his eyes. He moved to the initiator controls and began entering commands. Step away from the console, traitor, Dravix ordered, still holding Voss aloft. I'm sorry, Commander, Krelva said, his voice steady. But the general is right. Some weapons should never exist. With a final keystroke, he activated the initiator sequence, but with the sabotaged settings Voss had created. Warning klaxons immediately blared throughout the laboratory as energy levels began to spike. What have you done? Dravix released Voss, who collapsed gasping to the floor. Critical system failure imminent, announced the automated system. Evacuate immediately. Repeat, evacuate immediately. Dravix stared in horror at the monitoring screens, which showed the initiator core pulsing with increasingly unstable energy. Abort sequence. Override. Too late, Krelva said quietly. The quantum matrix is collapsing. Nothing can stop it now. The door to the laboratory sealed automatically as containment protocols engage. They were trapped. Voss dragged herself to a communication terminal. If she was going to die here, she would ensure Earth knew what had happened. She needed to warn the fleet to withdraw to a safe distance before Helcaraxu was destroyed. As she worked, Dravix rounded on Krelva. You've killed us all, you fool. No, the young scientist replied with unexpected calm. I've saved countless lives, including our own people who would have been caught in future retaliatory strikes. He looked at Voss. Sometimes victory requires sacrifice. Voss established a secure channel to the Earth fleet. General Ilara Voss to Earth Command. Project Supernova has been neutralized. Helcarax Station will self-destruct in approximately 10 minutes. Withdraw all forces to minimum safe distance. I repeat, withdraw all forces. The response came immediately. General Voss, this is Admiral Chen. We can dispatch extraction teams. Negative, Admiral. No time for extraction. Complete the mission. That's an order. She ended the transmission and turned to see Dravix watching her, his rage replaced by a strange respect. So this is how it ends, he said. We die together, enemies to the last. We die because you chose to create a weapon of mass destruction, Voss corrected him. Actions have consequences, Commander. The initiator core was now a maelstrom of energy, the containment fields visibly straining. Cracks began to appear in the laboratory floor as the power sought paths of escape. Krelva approached Voss, offering her a data crystal. I downloaded the research data before triggering the collapse. If we somehow survive, it would be wise to ensure no one can recreate this technology. Voss took the crystal and crushed it under her boot. Some knowledge isn't worth the cost. The lights flickered as power systems throughout the station began to fail. Through a viewport, Voss could see Earth vessels engaging the remaining Sargosa defenses, then beginning to pull back as her warning reached them. In those final moments, as the initiator core breached its containment, and the floor beneath them began to glow with destructive energy, General Ilara Voss felt not fear, but a profound sense of completion. Her mission, the one she had volunteered for knowing it would likely be her last, was accomplished. Earth and its allies would be safe from the threat of Project Supernova. The quantum stabilizers failed catastrophically, releasing their stored energy in a blinding flash that tore through the laboratory floor and into the station's power core. The resulting explosion consumed Helcarax Station in seconds, visible as a brief, brilliant star from light years away. Among the Earth fleet, ships observed a moment of silence for General Voss and the sacrifice she had made. Her final transmission was recorded in military archives and eventually taught at the Academy as an example of duty, courage, and the ultimate price of victory. In time, the war with the Sargosi would end, not through superweapons or mass destruction, but through the gradual, difficult work of diplomacy. And when peace finally came, historians would mark the destruction of Helcarax Station as the turning point, the moment when both sides began to understand that some victories aren't worth the cost. In the ruins of what had once been Helcarax, floating among the scattered debris of the station, a single escape pod drifted silently. Inside, barely alive but breathing, lay a human woman and a young Sargosi scientist. Their story was just beginning.